The way we take care of ourselves is ever evolving.
And what we know for sure is that our mind and spirit are linked to our physical body.
And that our wellness seems to extend into our communities and the planet we all share.
It is very, very clear that wellness is interconnected.
We love spending time with you to explore and practice the breakthroughs, the insights, and the passions of incredible people helping us all see the world in a whole new light.
This is Health Gig.
Rebecca Yarros is a New York Times bestseller and the author of over 20 books. Her recent series combines romance, dragons, adventure, and has become a sensation. And Tricia and I are hooked. We met Rebecca at the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy celebration of reading, and we can't wait for you to know her too. Rebecca, welcome to Health Gig. Tricia and I are so excited to have you join us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
We just kind of want to begin and talk a little bit about you. We want to know a little more about how you grew up and your family, and let's start there.
I was a military brat, so both my parents were active duty, and my grandfather was the Deputy Commanding General NORAD, so he retired here in Colorado Springs. So my parents retired here in Colorado Springs, and then I swore I would never date a man in the military. And then this beautiful, beautiful man sat down next to me in a karaoke bar, and I became a military in a karaoke bar, right? And I became a military wife. We moved around the globe. We had kids at every duty station, and then we retired back here in Colorado Springs.
And when you talk kids, you have 6.
I do. They age from ages 10 to 26, and they keep us on our toes at all times. All times. It's like stirring a multi-burner stove, just stirring every pot, trying to make sure no one boils over.
Exactly. Some are in college, or what range? And hockey players and all that?
Our 26-year-old is a foster care lawyer up in Denver. And
Oh, wow.
I know, right? She's incredible. I can't take credit. Our oldest son is at Pratt at the art school in Brooklyn. And then our next kid is at Cal State Northridge at the business school. And then we have 2 home in high school and our 10-year-old who is hopelessly trailing after them.
Oh, and we want to talk about your children and your interest in foster care. That's incredible that your daughter is a foster care lawyer, your oldest
Our oldest is a foster care lawyer. We adopted our youngest daughter from foster care. She saw kind of some of the inequities in the system and how hard it was to get our youngest diagnosed when her autism became, undeniable, and the services she really needed. And I think it really moved our oldest to pursue that avenue of law.
Yeah, and they're the 2 girls.
They're the 2 girls. They're our bookends.
The oldest is...
Yep.
Oh, and
they're my bookends.
Look out for each other. That's pretty sweet.
How did you get into the foster care, and how did this all happen?
My husband was in Afghanistan, as he was, for many of those years. And I remember watching a documentary, and I just remember thinking someone was missing in our family, and that we had the opportunity to provide love to a kid that would need it. And we were living in an area in New York that had a higher rate of kids in foster care. And we just thought, we can do this. We can provide love to another child. And we think we're okay parents. So far, the rest of them are, don't complain too much and they're still alive. So we think we can do this. We were actually about to just withdraw from foster care. We'd already fostered a little bit because we knew that a PCS, a move would be imminent at any day. And then they called me and said, would you mind fostering this little girl? I should only be for a month. And my husband, it was very miraculous. He hopped online at the same time. He was in Afghanistan. And I said, our social worker is asking if we can take a placement. And he said, okay, what do you want to say? And I said, I think we'll say yes. If it's just a month, we'll have time. And then he said, okay. And I told her, yes, we're happy to take the placement. And then I said, but we're headed to hockey. We're taking our kids to hockey practice right now. I am. How should we do this? And she said, well, bring her to the rink. And I said, you're going to bring her to the hockey rink? And they said, yes. So I drove into Watertown. I put my 2 oldest on the ice, and I walked into the parking lot, and I met the little girl who would eventually be our daughter. She was 5 months old. It was only supposed to be a month, and she ended up staying. We're very blessed.
And her name is Audrey Grace.
Audrey Grace, yes.
Did you name her, or did she come?
I talked to her biological mother about it because she'd asked us to adopt her. We kept one of her names as her middle name, and then gave her my grandmother's names as her first name, so that she would keep that continuous link to her past. but she wasn't identifying with her name yet. So it wasn't traumatic for her or anything. And her birth mother gave us her blessing.
And at that point, you didn't know she was autistic or on the spectrum
No.
when you adopted her.
No, we knew when we adopted her. We didn't know, of course, at 5 months old. We figured it out about a year. So by the time it came around and it was identified that it wasn't, safe for her to be reunited with her family, unfortunately, we already knew that she had autism and some other diagnoses that would make it so that she would probably be in our home for her life, that we would be forever parents at that point. Yes. We love her dearly. And just like I told our kids, we have a child with epilepsy. You just tackle that too. So really, when there's, something that's different about your children, you just learn to accommodate and you find the right specialists and the right doctors and you forge on.
And you and your husband are advocates for this, right?
We have a
For
nonprofit and we're not really advocates for foster care as much as we are advocates for the kids being brought into care. So you can call our nonprofit and we'll provide a bag of clothes and a school supplies or a backpack, anything that's brand new. Because a lot of kids are brought into foster care and the very next day they're sent to school. And of course, they only have what they brought with them. And I don't fault the biological parents. There's a lot of trauma that goes into having a child removed. And I couldn't imagine trying to pack everything a child would need or what head state I would be in. But a lot of times they don't have enough to go to school, to have life the next day. So you can call us and we will provide a bag, an unmarked bag, so that they can use it and not be identified as a kid in care, and clothing for a week. Because when our daughter came, she didn't have a lot. And Jason, of course, was deployed. And so I was running amok with the rest of my children because we weren't prepared for a baby. We thought we were fostering like toddlers or things like that. So we were not prepared for a baby. And I remember our second son sitting on the floor the morning after we brought her home, holding her while I made lunches because I didn't have a swing and I didn't have, a bouncer or anything.
And your not-for-profit is called 1 October?
It's called 1 October. It was the date she was brought to us.
And your extended family's all near you. So do you have a lot of support with your mom and dad and your sister? We met your sister.
Yes, you did.
Yes, we did.
Isn't she wonderful? She's such a force of nature.
Amazing.
There's something wonderful about traveling with my older sister because we fall into those roles. And so she can look at something and be like, Rebecca, I can't eat that because I can't have gluten or anything like that. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But she just takes charge. My parents are nearby. My nieces and nephews are here. My brothers aren't. They live scattered across the United States. But it's nice to have a core unit of us here.
And then there's just something else you do. And then there's just something else you do.
And then I write. Yeah.
Wait a minute. You've written over 20 books?
Yeah.
So when did you know you wanted to be a writer?
I was in like 4th grade and we were stationed in Germany with my dad and they had a young authors contest and I wrote a book of poetry about my mom being on orders for Desert Storm. It won the competition and I got to go to the conference and see my little book bound in the little spiral notebooks.
Yes.
And I remember holding it and I always laugh because the biography author is misspelled because I wrote it myself.
Oh.
So I have been in need of an editor since 4th grade, but I held that book and I thought, this is a dream to be able to tell stories, to be a storyteller. And then people would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And gradually, it would shift to a doctor, a historian, something practical. But I just always wanted to write. So I wrote a book in high school for a project. And then it took me till I was 29 to graduate college because we moved from base to base to base and I lost my credits. And once I graduated, my husband was gone. I think it was his 3rd deployment. And I wrote a page a night. So I would get in bed and I would write a single page. And then I'd put my laptop on my pillow next to me just in case he would Skype because he was gone. And when he came home, I had my very first book.
What's your first book?
That I can't tell you because it never sold. So it's still, I know.
Sold.
It was heartbreaking and I was shocked. I thought, just like every young person with a new book, like this book is amazing. It is not amazing. And it, it didn't sell. It got me an agent. And while it was out there on submission, I wrote what would become my debut. And that picked up and sold and published right after he came home from the 4th deployment.
You made up for that first one. Don't worry about it. You're just fine.
I don't think I could have written Fourth Wing without having written the others first, really.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes, it
It
does.
was processed.
You have to learn your craft.
Oh my gosh. Okay, fourth wing. Oh my God.
It's fourth wing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh
So
my God.
that exploded on Book Talk, right?
It did.
That's how we came to know about it. So talk about that and what is Book Talk and how does that all work?
So, Book Talk is a part of TikTok where book bloggers and book readers all get together and they share their favorite books. And you have people with, 1 million followers and you have people with 19 followers. It's a group of readers that are dedicated to reading and loving books. And it's really the last publisher-free space where publishers can't really influence other than sending like advanced reader copies. There's no ads. So publishers can't really push ads, and where you can buy ad space on other social media platforms or Goodreads. Book Talk is truly word of mouth. One of my books had got, The Things Leave Unfinished had kind of gotten picked up on Book Talk, and I'd kind of seen a little bit of it and said, oh, wow, this is wild. And of course, I'm 42. I am not like the
You're
TikTok
only
generation.
42?
I am 42.
God, but still, 42? See all of what you've done? Okay, keep going.
But my son's a cosplayer on TikTok. And I remember the day, like, fourth wing started just getting picked up. And so I started seeing videos and videos and videos. And I'm going, oh gosh, this is wild. Because at the same time, I'm finishing Iron Flame. So I was already finishing Iron Flame before Fourth Wing ever came out. And I remember my son calling me and saying, you have more followers than I do. And I said, how is that possible? I don't really post. Like, I'm not out there. But yes, it got picked up on Book Talk. And I'm so very grateful that community took Fourth Wing and embraced it and loved it and kind of made it their own. And it just skyrocketed. Yeah, I was not prepared, to say the least. I did not expect any of this when writing Fourth Wing.
When did it come out, or when did you write Fourth Wing? And then when did all the Book Talk stuff start happening?
So I wrote a little bit in April. My child was going in to have a titanium bar put in his chest because we have Ehlers-Danlos. I had just written the first 10 pages. You got to try out, right? You have to submit and hope you're good enough to get picked up.
Right.
And my publisher called and said, when can you write this book? And I said, I'm in the hospital with my kid. And she's like, right, but when you get home, when can you write this book? You're going to launch the line. And I was shocked, just stunned. And so we got home and I got him situated. And it took about a week. Of course, having a pectus surgery is statistically incredibly painful for kids. And then once he was okay, I wrote the next 40 pages and it went out to places. And then I finished another book. And then I wrote Fourth Wing in between June and July of 2022. And it came out May 2nd of 2023. So it's only been 9 months of this like whirlwind.
That's
Insaneness.
right. It's such a wow. Okay, I know, Dora, when we were hiking this morning, we're like, where did it come from? I know you get that all the time, but like, I know you said that Violet probably has been around for a while, maybe, or was she not really around for a while?
My publisher, when I found out they were going to do a romantasy line, like a romantic fantasy, I said, yes, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. My first book was an urban fantasy, the one that didn't sell. And so I said, yes, this is what I want. And my publisher said, great, send us 5 pitches. I'm like, okay. So you have to think of 5 different worlds and 5 different storylines, which is no pressure. I wrote them in order of what I would like to write. And as I was writing these pitches, I thought dragons. And I love dragons. I grew up reading Anne McCaffrey. I love Christopher Paolini. In the midst of all this, I got to meet him and he's fantastic. So I thought of the idea of, you see fated mates all the time, but what if that trope was between the dragons and you have these people who can't stand each other and they're tied together because they're dragons, are mates. I started putting it at a military unit, that the dragons select their writers. And of course, military is pretty much what I've written. And then my publisher said, this is great. Why don't we lean into your new adult? Because I write mostly new adult, like college age. Let's set it at a war college. And that was it. It took off from there. That one sentence idea I had about someone who had been involved in a rebellion and, a weaker girl, an underdog being brought up, it came together with that one sentence. And suddenly the ideas just flew. I talked to my publisher and I said, I'd really like her to have what I have. And I had to explain to her what, Ehlers-Danlos is, because not a lot of people know about it.
No.
It's rare, isn't it? Sort of.
It's classified.
Except for it's genetic.
It's genetic. It's classified as rare. I think a lot of people have it. They just haven't been diagnosed. And like all 4 of my biological children, I gave it to them. You're only supposed to be able to give it to 50%, but I gave it to all 4.
Can you tell us what it is?
Absolutely.
What is Ehlers-Danlos?
So it's a connective tissue disorder, and I have a fault in the way I make my collagen. I do not make my collagen correctly. My skin is softer. I'm less likely to wrinkle, but my joints pop out. Our bones break easily. Our skin tears easily. Our scars tear easily. I had to have my shoulder reconstructed at 18 years old. Didn't know why. All three of my boys have scoliosis. One of our kids had his sternum compressing his heart, which is why he had the titanium bar put in. So it gives us these abnormalities and these challenges. It's the kind of chronic illness. There's no cure for it. So I suffer with POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Three of my boys also suffer from it, which means when we stand up, our heart starts to race and we can pass out, our blood pressure bottoms out. Things like that. It comes with a lot of autonomic nervous system problems. So you just kind of take it as it comes, and it presents differently between me and all of my children. We see a wide variety of it.
All four of your boys played hockey.
They did. We were diagnosed in 2020 during the pandemic.
When you say we, you mean you didn't know before this, before 2020?
Nope. I had no clue.
Oh, wow.
I just thought we were really unlucky, and they would break bones all the time and dislocate joints all the time. And finally, these scans came back on my oldest son's spine and my youngest son's chest cavity. And I just thought, how unlucky can you possibly be? And I Googled siblings with pectus excavatum and scoliosis, and it came back with connective tissue, Marfan's, and EDS. It just clicked, and I said, oh my gosh, this is what we had. This is what's wrong with all of us. And at the time, I was having my very first real POTS flares, and my vestibular migraines were coming on so severely. We didn't know what they were at the time. I thought I was dying. Like, I remember telling my husband, get an autopsy. We went through all the doctors, the geneticists, and everything. And they said, yes, it's Ehlers-Danlos. This is what all of you had. And so we looked at our boys' activities and we said, where are you getting your worst injuries? And they were coming from soccer, a little bit of lacrosse. One of our kids ran cross country. That's something, that isn't really good for his knees, but they all loved hockey. And at this point, our oldest was going off to college and it wasn't as much a choice for him. But we talked to the other three and they said, no, we're going to keep it. We're going to keep hockey. And we let them. They're protected with their chest pads, their elbow pads. I mean, they're hockey players. You chuck a puck at them and it's going to bounce off. And of course, they've had on-ice injuries and were more prone to concussion. But watching them decide to persevere, even though they knew what the risks were, was incredibly inspiring. So I kind of looked at them and thought, if my kids can go play hockey with this, knowing that they're concussion prone, knowing that one of them has a custom chest protector because he's a bar at his chest, I could write about someone with this going through the most brutal environment possible and achieving against all odds to become a dragon rider. And that's where Violet came from.
The thing I love that I think makes your book so juicy, like I couldn't put it down, it was the idea of enemies becoming lovers.
Yeah, it's a great trope, isn't it?
It's like, wow, it's so scandalous and fun to read. I mean, that was just a brilliant whatever theme or thought that you had.
It's a very popular trope, but because I always write contemporary, I've never been able to do it. Because I always feel like in contemporary romance, you don't have enemies to lovers, not truly. You have people with a disagreement. You have people who can sit down and hash it out over a cup of coffee. And in a fantasy setting, when you have, this setting where his father led a rebellion that got her brother killed and her mother has killed his father for the rebellion, you have the true ability to make it an enemies. I just jumped at the chance. I thought, how deliciously fun.
So you're still cooking dinner, you're taking the kids to hockey, you guys are doing all the stuff. So when are you writing Fourth Wing? At night still?
No.
Okay.
So my husband and I made a deal. When he was in the military, we made a deal. And the deal was, you do 20 and then I get to drive the train. That's what he would always say. I do my 20 and then you get to drive the train. So he went to 22 years. We'd gone through 5 deployments and I said, I love you, but I have to stabilize our kids. And that means I got to love you from here. You can keep going, but I have to love you from here. The kids need roots. Just because having grown up in the military, I knew that's what I desperately wanted. He chose to get out. So we switched and I started writing full time and he picks up the kids and he runs our family. It happened right before the pandemic. So naturally, he went from flying Apache helicopters to being stuck in the house, with all of his children and his wife for, a year. He's handled it with such grace and he's never once not applauded me or pushed me or supported me. It's been incredible, but we just flip-flopped. He retired and I started writing full time. And I was writing another book called In the Likely Event at the same time. And I went to him and said, can I do this? Can I write these books back to back like this? Because I already had a contract on In the Likely Event. And he said, yeah. He said, you can do this. You just need to tell me what you need and we will make this happen for you. And he gave me the time. I don't think a lot of stay-at-home moms get that credit when it's the husband out there doing the same, but he's done it so gracefully that I just can't help but give him all the credit in the world because I couldn't have done it.
And he reads it. So
Yeah.
you're right. And then
He likes to wait till the book is done. And I have a plot board in my office. And now he'll walk in and he'll shield his eyes like this when he talks to me so he doesn't see my plot board because he got spoiled with Iron Flame. And as he was, putting things up and helping me, transcribe the plot board, he looked at me and said, "You're going to do what?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, it's going to be okay." And then he walked out of my office. And so writing the third one right now, he won't look at the plot board when he's in my office. He refuses to.
So you're writing the third one.
Yeah.
And when do you think that'll be out?
I know, but I can't tell. No.
You can't tell.
Okay,
That's
good.
No, I think we're just kind of finalizing that.
And it was supposed to be 3, and then it ended up 5.
It did.
How did that happen?
Oh my gosh, because I'm a plotter. So we knew we had the television series when I was in edits for Fourth
Tell
Wings.
us about that.
That's
That
exciting.
is wild.
Yeah, tell us about the television. Yeah,
It
tell us. And how's that feel?
It was
and how's it happen?
surreal. All of it feels surreal. It feels like someone's going to come to my door and get their life back. And for the most part,
This is not me.
right. And for the most part, unless I'm on tour or I'm doing an event or something like this, it really is just my husband and I and my kids. We're still just us and our family. And then I also write and have to go do things for it, if that makes any sense. So the television series, it went to auction. I remember just sitting there thinking, how is this happening? And it turns out my editor had sent out one of my first drafts. And I didn't know that until we were in the middle of this meeting and they said, well, there's this point here and here. And I wanted to sink into the floor, into a pit of nothingness. I'm like, you have my first draft. So it went to auction and it sold, thank goodness.
Oh, no.
Very humbled for it. It was picked up by Amazon and Outlier. Outlier had one of the first diversity and inclusion writers in Hollywood, and I could not have been more happy, in the background of this auction, just cheering them on. And so we knew that was going to happen. And so I sat down and I needed to write a synopsis for how the entire series would end so that they would have it. And as I started looking at it, I wrote something out and I started Iron Flame. And as I looked at the timeline of Iron Flame, I realized it needed to be 6 months, not a full year. And Fourth Wing is a full year. And I called my editor and I said, just an idea, maybe it's 5 and maybe this is why, but think about it. Go to Macmillan, think about it. And she's like, nope, it's 5. And so I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, it's 5. It's 5.
Okay.
But the whole thing's plotted out for the 5 books. So it was needed for the
Amazing.
timeline.
In Fourth Wing, you have a gazillion characters, a gazillion. How do you develop each and every one, and how do you keep track of everything, and how does that work?
So I had this little pink binder, which just Fourth Wing on it because my husband bedazzled it for me. So as I start, I love pen and paper. Every time I name a character, I write it at the top of the sheet, and then I develop them on the sheet. And I say, who are you? What's your backstory?
Okay.
How many siblings do you have? Where do you come from? What region do you come from? Do you have a tragic backstory? And then as I write, I refer back to that sheet and I add to it. And they're people to me. So, developing the squad, I looked and I said, who are these people that are coming into the story and how do they fit and what are their personalities and how does Violet relate to them and how do they build each other and build this chosen family, really? And then my editor said, we're going to need that. So I had to transcribe it all into an online document so that my publisher could have access to it for edits for continuity.
So when you're writing, are you kind of really identifying with Violet? So you're feeling know her, or did you have to get to know her too?
It's very odd. I always feel like the weirdest person when I say this. When I write in first person POV, I kind of sink into that character to where I feel as though I'm within them. The world around me kind of falls away. Fourth Wing opens with her climbing the steps and then walking down the hall to her mother's office. And I really just felt like, what do these steps feel like? What is my mood? How am I feeling? What is this heaviness in my chest? Everyone is waiting outside these walls. It's conscription day, and that's the deadliest. What is about to happen to me? And so I just kind of sink into her, and she develops as we go through the story. And she, kind of reveals things to me. But the EDS is mine. So her chronic illness is mine. So I identify with, at this point, my knees would be killing me. At this point, my hip might try to slide out of place. And I add those little bits. And then all the characters, they just kind of appear. And I think she needs a protective older sister. The older sister is not my sister. Let's start that. Because
she's not your sister.
No,
okay.
because the second my mother listens to this, she'll start thinking she's the mother. And then that does not make for a pleasant dinner conversation. So no one's ever based on anyone in like real life, except my husband bleeds into all the guys. I can't explain it. But really, I know Violet because I'm inside Violet the best. And Zayden. I do have a couple chapters from Zayden's point of view, and I always have to be able to step inside Zayden and say, what is he thinking? What is he feeling? Where is he coming from at this moment? So that he's developing as well.
But back to the TV
Yeah.
thing. Do you have input in that? And do you get to say who's going to be Violet and who's going to be Zayden?
Oh gosh, I would never. I always believe in deferring to people in areas of their expertise. I talk to the production staff a lot. The team is very protective of the source material. They've been protective since day one. They give me warm, fuzzy feelings. The decisions they've made so far have all been to protect the source material. And I've been really careful not to really have what authors might call a fan cast, like who they want to see it, because I don't want to influence that process or have the readers think this is who it should be, and then set that actor or actress up for failure by not being who the readers would want. And so I'm honestly just sitting back and watching them do their thing. They've invited me into the writer's room, but honestly, it's not to write. It's mostly so I can kind of say, hey, that plot point might interfere with book 4. You just don't know it. Or,
yeah,
hey,
sort of consult.
This character is going to have this problem coming up and this might not go there. I want to get out of their way as much as possible so they can make the best adaptation. And I trust them to stay close to the source material.
So when you said earlier that the market is the new adults.
Yeah.
Has that changed though? Like Dora and I are obsessed with it.
We're genre.
We're not new adults.
And it was funny. Our daughters, or my daughter who you met, was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. And then she's like, Mom, you have to read it. But then she was like a little bit like, I don't know if you're going to like it kind of thing. I like loved it.
Thank
and then
you.
Dora read it and you like loved it.
The genre is new adult. It's marketed to new adults, but just like mature women, we read YA too. We read every genre. It's the genre that's new adult. So it's the characters are the ages between, I like to think 18 to 25. Like right after you leave your family, you should be on your own or in a college dorm, but your brain shouldn't be fully developed yet. You're making bigger mistakes, harder choices that have much bigger stakes. You don't have your parents to fall back on. And I always like to think of it as like a freshman girl's dorm, like in the bathroom at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
You know, with some girl crying, some girl saying, don't text your ex. You're worth more. That kind of delicious drama that happens at that age because everything feels so much bigger. So it's really just the genre that's new adult.
Okay. That makes sense.
Well, it's fun for us to go back and remember that kind of drama.
Isn't it? It's such a great escape.
Yeah.
I live with it. So between, my sons are 19 and about to be 21. I live with their slang and I live with their drama when they come home, of course, and they call. And I live with, their speech patterns. And so I feel like I'm very much still absorbed in that world in my house.
It must be surreal. Like you said before this, it's your kids and your life and your family. And then you go and you have this world and come back. But how is that? Like to have people looking at the letters you write to your son and all the stuff that now we're all so interested in about you.
I think terrifying is a great word for it. I used to write one of the most popular military wife blogs in the country. We shut it down when we were fostering our daughter just because it was kind of a danger to her, a privacy violation. I was used to my kids being exposed. If I have one regret in any of my publishing career, it is how exposed my children are and how much they are out there. I didn't think that through when they were little, and so we tried to remedy it as they've gotten older. But I'd never been exposed on the level that Book Talk does. So first thing I did was leave. I left Book Talk. I took the app off my phone because it was like every single video that I was stumbling across, even though I had blocked my name and I had blocked Fourth Wing and blocked Empyrean series, I would still get served the videos. And I could be having a day and I would just be on TikTok and it would say like, I'm there for like baby goats and Highland cows and like really cute, funny things. And I would see like, we love your book, I hate your book. I love your book, I hate your book. And I found it was like living in a giant house full of mirrors. No one should see themselves that much. And the discussion would change from the book to me. And then people would have misinformation about me. And I can't combat that. And I'm sitting there going, that's not true, but that's not true. And it's harder, I think, on my children in that regard because they're on social media in that generation. We have talks as a family, like, you guys know who I am. I know who you are. You just need to steer clear of this, to not bring this in. But it's been wild for them to do things like my oldest son came to New York Comic Con with me. My third son is going to come to Seattle Comic Con with me this weekend. it's this delicate balance of letting them have fun, but while keeping them safe and trying to keep their lives private so that they get to reveal what they want in their lives. And it's a steep learning curve. It's really steep.
I really understand what you're saying about it's much harder on the kids to see the misinformation about the person they love than it is for you because, you know, you're like, okay, that's not true. But for your children, it's much harder.
Yeah. And my boys always want to rise to my defense, especially because they're the generation that's on TikTok. Our daughter's kind of above it and off doing her thing, but our boys see it and it's really hard. But honestly, we just have those conversations and they're strong enough to know and strong enough to stay out of the discourse. Because I hope they are. If not, reel them back in and say, no.
Right,
But,
right.
Yeah.
Deal with it. Then
But the best thing I've ever done for my mental health was to leave.
So how do you do it? Do you stop thinking about it? I mean, now that you've got your plotted it out, it's timelined out and everything, but are you thinking about your characters? Are you thinking about it? Like when you're sitting at a meeting, are you thinking, oh, that's a good one. Oh, I'll do that next time.
So I have ADHD inattentive type, which does not help.
Oh, so you have ADHD and what did you say?
Inattentive type? Inattentive. It's a type of ADHD.
Inattentive type.
Inattentive. So in the middle of a conversation, my brain will jolt off here and there, and I'll have to really concentrate and bring myself back to the topic. A bunch of my children have a hyperactive type, and one of them has combined. So again, genetics. Genetics are fun. I'm always thinking about Violet. I construct a playlist before I start any book. I listen to it as I drive or as my husband drives, or I walk into my office and as I'm doing those admin tasks that have now swallowed my day, because being me is now taking more time than writing, which I'm not okay with. And I'm working on forming a new normal. I'm always thinking about Violet. I'm always thinking about the next scene. I'm always thinking about the blocking. I'm always thinking about how does this tie in? How does this fit in the overall world? How does what I'm going to lay here come back in book 5? How does what I laid in book 1 get addressed in book 3 without fully coming to completion in book 4? My brain is always swirling. It never stops. And my poor husband will look at me and he'll be talking to me and suddenly he'll go, "You're not here, are you?" I'm like, "No, I'm not here."
And it's so interesting that I'm going to call it condition, right? Actually lends itself to allow for all that. If you didn't have that,
it is a challenge.
If you didn't have it,
I truly believe that having ADHD allows me I can make a single change in a plot and my brain will automatically follow it to its conclusion. So I can make a single change midway through and I'll think, okay, domino goes here, 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 and here. We're back to here. But if I change it here, it'll domino to here and here and here. And I can hold both plots in my head simultaneously and then pick the best outcome and go. I think it helps me plot way faster.
That makes so much sense, having read your book. Every turn and twist, it has to take a mind like yours to do that.
Do you go back and say, oh, maybe it should have gone this way?
I don't think any of us ever sit back and think that book was perfect. You know, there's always something we would want to change. I try not to reread, but of course with Empyrean, I have to reread constantly for continuity and to make sure that I'm drawing out every Easter egg I've laid. There's some things that, you know, in edits will get taken out that I have to look back and say, I'm going to have to put that back in the third book because I need that to tie in for the next book or things like that. But there's no major plot points. Like, I don't regret anyone I've killed. I'm sorry. I don't. I know I get a lot of flack for that, but I just try to take what I've already written and move forward under the pressure that is writing it and move forward.
So you touched on music before, but I'd read that you write to music.
I write to music if I need to, like if there's an emotion that I need to feel when I'm going into a scene, because I'm very big on visceral reactions. I want the reader to feel how that character is feeling, and I want them to feel how I feel, and I want the reader's bodies to react how the characters are. And there are certain songs that will put me in that headspace. So, you know, in scenes where I kill people, I listen to a lot of like Brandi Carlile's Tragedy, the Austin Cello version. And I had been listening to a ton of Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince when I started thinking of the ideas for Fourth Wing. And I remember I'd been driving down the road and I was like, I love this song. It's political in nature. It's talking about a school, but it's not really a school. And it just kind of bled in, and a lot of Nightmare by Halsey. So a lot of really strong female artists. But if I find myself singing along, which with ADHD I do, I will turn off the playlist and I'll put on like a form of white noise or like a sound that's meant to kind of tune my brain in. But yes, I typically do start with music.
How do you take care of yourself? I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't even know we weren't even going to ask that. So we don't want, but how do you do that?
I always feel like when you have time and you have stuff you have to do, and it's my body that pays that price. I have a limited amount of time I should spend at the computer because of vestibular migraines. And I just blow right past it and put myself in the worst possible situations. I sit ergonomically and my feet are level or just a little bit raised so that my blood doesn't end up in my legs when I pass out. I make sure I'm hydrated. I always sit down with water. My husband and my sister are constantly shoving water at me to stay hydrated. And
That's good.
I try, when I'm not on deadline, I try to make sure I prioritize my kids. I feel like
Yeah.
they got the short end of the stick this last year. I really feel like they did. And they're very proud and they're very supportive. But there have been so many times I haven't been able to take care of myself or be there when I wanted to because of how quickly this book has blown up and been successful. So I'm trying to be more conscious. I'm trying to make sure I'm sleeping. I'm getting at least 7 to 8 hours a night. And during deadlines,
That's
I'll
good.
get 4. I try to make sure.
Oh, I would imagine.
It's wild. Yeah, I just try to make sure I'm sleeping. I'm searching just like every other working mother in the world. I'm searching for that perfect work-life balance. I don't have it. If someone has the secret, I would love to know it, but I do not have
I want
it.
to know.
It's
No, I
not
know.
easy.
There's a quote from Shonda Rhimes where she said, "Where you see me succeeding at one, I'm failing at the other." It hit me in the heart. I read it when my son was in the hospital getting his bar. And this weekend is my son's last time playing club hockey, but I will miss it because I'll be at Comic-Con promoting him with my other son. And you just try. You try to take care of yourself the best you can. But when push comes to shove, my kids will come first. And then the body just yells at me.
So true. And yet, ironically, your writing is helping other people be healthy because reading is so good for us in so many ways.
It's a great escape.
So, okay, we have to ask about Indarna.
She's the
We
sweetest
love
thing.
her. Does everyone love her? Is she sort of...
Everyone loves her. If you haven't read Iron Flame yet, she grows to her teenage years in Iron Flame. Having teenagers, she has a lot of those qualities. A little less adorable, but funny. I love her because she kind of balances Violet out and because she's smaller and, not to give it away, there's a reason she's smaller to begin with. And I love her because Violet is the least likely person to make it through the quadrant. She ends up with 2 dragons. But in Darna, she's really the key to a lot of what is happening in this world. And she reflects Violet in so many ways and the accommodations that Violet needs to be successful and the challenges Darna faces in book 2 because of her actions in book 1. So I love being able to kind of draw attention to the accommodations that everyone kind of needs.
When you were at the celebration of reading, you said that your book got so much more attention on the sex scenes.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Because Dora and I were talking about that too. And we're like, yeah, it's interesting. So if you can talk about that.
I'd seen a couple TikToks that were saying that some teachers were, reading it and that it should be banned and things like that. And banning books is always a very, very close subject to my heart. And so why we, shouldn't censor reading or history. But I looked at that and all the complaints were on sex. And I said, well, hold on. I'm killing. There are 20-year-old young adults being murdered on every page of this book. And you guys are concerned
and
with
that's okay with you?
But you're concerned with the sex. And I'm sitting here going, for every 20-year-old that's going to read this, I would hope they would be more likely to have sex than to murder people. It floored me. And especially because I was making such a point about warfare and the gratuitous violence of this culture.
We were laughing about those spicy scenes because, our kids are like, oh, no, you can't read that. You're going to die. You're going to be. And Tricia and I are like, we've heard it all. We've seen it all. Okay. I mean, that's, we're in our 60s and nothing phases us. So don't worry about it.
I remember my grandmother saying to me, why does every generation think they invented sex? I think I was like 12 or something like that. And it just kind of stuck with me. And of course, it's spicy scenes because it's a romance.
Right. It's a romance.
It's a romance. So you're going to have those spicy scenes. You can't, I guess you could write it without it, but it wouldn't be nearly as much fun.
Exactly. And as you said, it's the new adult.
These are consenting adults. These are not minors. These are not teenagers. These are consenting adults. My daughter got married the weekend before it came out. And I remember she called and she's like, well, we took Fourth Wing on our honeymoon. And my husband and I read it. I'm like, you took your mother on your honeymoon? Okay, that was a choice. but I would let my children read it. I don't censor what they read. So it just floored me that that was the issue and not the gratuitous murder.
It's just such an incredible story. All
Thank
your
you.
stories, your personal story, really, Rebecca, is so inspirational.
Oh, no,
I mean,
thank you.
what you've accomplished with your family and how you guys are dealing with it all is so inspirational. We loved meeting you.
We're just doing the best we can. Thank
You're
you.
doing a really good job.
A really
Really,
good job.
really are.
I think my favorite part of having Fourth Wing out there and having Fourth Wing blow up, despite the pressure, despite the sleeping changes, not all good. It's been amazing to see the feedback from people with Ehlers-Danlos, to get the messages and saying, hey, thank you. We feel represented for the first time. And I've never seen myself as the main character. And this is what told me I can get out of bed today and I can go is people like us, we can do this when we're given accommodations. And I think that to me has been the best part of Fourth Wing blowing up and doing what it has, is you have a character with chronic illness sitting as a bestseller, which you don't often get to see. And it's been incredibly humbling. And I'm just so glad to have been able to offer some representation.
Thank you. We just love you. Okay.
Thank you. You guys are so nice.
Yes.
Oh my
Thank you.
God.
Thank you for joining us
Amazing.
today.
Yes.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on Health Gig. We loved having you with us. We hope you'll tune in again next week. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast and follow us on healthgigpod.com. I'm Tricia.
And I'm Doro.
Be well.